Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our third installment of our live panel discussions. My name is Lanny, and I'll be your host this afternoon. As part of a collaborative initiative, Trifork and GoTo have organized today's Tech Leader panel discussion, Scalability at Speed, Exceed Customer Expectations, with Adi Polak joining us from Tel Aviv, Marcel van Bentum, and Andre Carlucci, who are both joining us from the Netherlands. Unfortunately, Dennis was unable to join us today, but I'm sure we'll have a great event nonetheless. In today's panel, our panelists will be discussing how to use modern application development to exceed customer expectations and the importance of stability in this process. The panelists will share their personal experiences and the lessons learned working at their respective companies. We will also have a live Q&A towards the end of the session, so please feel free to submit any of your questions that you may have in our live chat function. Adi, Andre, and Marcel, thank you very much for being here with us today and taking the time to be here. Let me just ask you to start us off by giving a short introduction on yourself. Adi, I'll hand over to you to start the introductions.
Yeah, sure do. Thank you, Lanny, for having me. So hi, everyone. It's great to be here today. My name is Adi Polak. I live in Israel, specifically in Tel Aviv. I'm a senior manager at Microsoft under the Azure engineering team, responsible for cloud scale analytics or advanced analytics, or actually a couple of years ago, we used to call it big data, helping and supporting customers in that field when they're using Azure technologies.
Great. Andre, can you take it away again?
Of course. Well, my name is Andre Carlucci. I'm from Brazil, living here in the Netherlands since beginning 2019. And now I'm working for Keenly, which is the third biggest video conference company in the world. And there I'm taking care of the whole software engineering part. I'm also close to the community, so I'm also a Microsoft MVP for the past 9 years and still part of the global, like a global advisor for Microsoft within the program Versional Directors. And I'm very happy to be here today.
Good.
And Marcel.
Yeah, so my name is Marcel van Bentum. Currently a Chief Commercial Officer for Trifork here in the Netherlands, responsible for our sales and marketing effort. I've been working in the IT industry since before the millennium. We have witnessed many technological journeys with a wide variety of customers, transformations, and sort of new technical implementations. So I don't have a technical background myself, but I've seen a lot.
All right, great. Well, thank you all for that. Yeah, I think let's just kick off the discussion. I have the first question, which we've received in advance. And so the first question would be, what are some of the biggest shifts that have occurred amongst your customer base in recent times, and how have you been able to respond? Marcel, would you like to start off?
We are a services company, so we typically work for our customers. So the biggest change that I see is the demand for flexible architectures and platforms, because I guess we live in uncertain times and speed is of the essence. So what you think is good today is not good anymore tomorrow, and you need to have a flexible architecture and IT landscape to be able to adapt to that. So at the moment we apply a lot of microservices architectures with loosely coupled components able to integrate with the rest of the technical world, basically. Wow. You see that
Maybe
as
I
well?
can.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was going to ask you what you see, Adi.
Oh, thanks. Well, we all know that there's a huge digital transformation happening in the world, and a lot of different commerce that wasn't online before, and different businesses that are more traditional, more of a traditional and less online, realized that in order to thrive throughout the pandemic, they need to move to the online platform. So we see a lot of small businesses actually embracing the the digital space. So embracing cloud technologies and understanding that they need to hire either a developers or some IT people to start their journey with that. And it happens faster than we thought it's going to be. I remember looking at some of the keynotes from the Microsoft flagship events, and they talked about this happening in the next 5-10 years. But actually, the last 2 years, increase the speed of which small businesses, small, medium businesses understand that they need to move to the cloud, and also find a way to build their business around in a digital space as well, and making sure it's maintainable, because they're not IT-based companies necessarily, but they still need to think how they integrate IT into their business.
Interesting. Yeah, within Kili, what we saw, well, because Kili builds a physical meeting rooms for our clients, but it will also provide the software to extend that meeting room into a virtual meeting like this one that we have right now. And what we have seen, of course, as you can imagine, is this boom within like people not going to the office anymore, and suddenly everybody's using video conference. And then everybody has, people are working from home, so they have to use VPNs and security, and they have to connect to the cloud and everything. So a lot of processes and demand that we had for the going to the offices and so on. Now it's all digital, all going to the cloud, and software everywhere. And the companies, they had to adapt.
Right. Okay.
But
Well,
but I guess that shift was hugely impacted because of the COVID pandemic.
Exactly. So we have a lot of
It's not by
clients.
just natural causes or great, great ambitious views towards the future or something.
Exactly. Yeah, we see clients that they were using like 200 concurrent users into video calls at the same time, and now after the pandemic up to 5,000. It was quite interesting to go together with our teams and say, hey, you just see the Grafana charts and the users going up, and we were having to we think about how to scale the thing so fast with the people that we had at the time. It was quite interesting boom in our systems.
Yeah. Have you been experiencing similar growth figures, Andre, as Zoom?
Sorry again.
Have you been experiencing the similar growth figures as Zoom, for instance?
Probably not the same as Zoom, because Zoom is into the more the consumer market, right? And we were more with governments and other big companies internally. But it's the same idea, right? People started using those meeting rooms everywhere. And the difference is that we are doing all the transcoding to every meeting that we are providing our platform. So we had to put more and more servers every time. So you could see the burst nodes going up to support all the clients. And of course, it was a bumpy road, because we were not expecting that explosion. But luckily we have very smart engineers that they were able to support this new load and understand what was happening. And then, of course, for all of that, having analyzed the right architecture and monitoring tools that we had helped it a lot.
That's really interesting. We've seen, there was a lot of growth, but one of the areas was actually in education. And you see schools starting to adopt, different Microsoft technologies like Microsoft Team, Whiteboard, etc., where they're not necessarily know how to use those online technologies, or even how to go through from a real classroom into a virtual classroom and engage the students or anything of such. So it was definitely interesting to see how people that are not necessarily IT pros or tech savvies are now embracing those technologies, and what we can do in order to make it easier on them to embrace those technologies. So it was also another interesting domain.
yeah. All right. Well, scalability is an essential measure to ensure that your company is capable of growing with your customers and business goals. How true is this for your respective companies? And could you provide some examples?
Right. At least for Kili, we have two different, two different streams where we experience a lot of scalability there. One is smart monitoring, which we take like physical meeting rooms and we measure everything that's happening there. So that one, it's a bit easier because we know when the things are going to scale. It's when we sell more physical meeting rooms, right? So it's easier because you can predict more or less what the amount of data that's coming. The other one is what we call the Kini Cloud, which is the video conference part of the things. And that one you cannot really predict. Well, you know that things are going up during working hours and things go down after, working hours. But then again, how many, meeting rooms are going to be there? And our clients, they just click a button and it's another meeting room, another meeting room, another meeting room, and so on. So yeah, the scalability in this case is key for us to actually to stay in business, because if you tip over your capability, you could bring the whole system down. So it was very essential for us to be prepared for that.
Yeah, I can say likewise. It's there's a couple of scalability areas. Like one is the more tech oriented. How do we scale as to support more customers? But the second one is how do we scale sometimes as a team? How do we scale the processes, especially for a global company? How do we scale, beyond our specific region if we need to? Because what happens in the pandemic, we all went to, we are now actually able to work with people across regions, right? Because we don't have to travel to different offices anymore. We just, open our favorite communication tool and start working with someone from a totally different region. So I think the scale there is huge, and the opportunities for impact were huge as well. So how do we scale the processes to go from offline in-office work versus online, remote, or even hybrid, and that in today's world. And also, what can we leverage? What other tools exist that we can leverage versus what we can build in-house?
Yeah, that's very interesting, indeed. I mean, companies, they have to change, from one day to another, basically. Okay, we work in the same office and now we work remote. And the thing is, one thing is, it's not that we work remote, we were forced to work from our homes, right? Which it's different. Because when you work remote, maybe you have like a nice space where an office in your place where you can use, or maybe you are working from the dinner room with your kids running around and all these problems that we had to learn how to work. And that's just part of the equation, right? Because people were used to, while we were in the office, to just go and book around. Hey, can I talk 15 minutes with you? I could just, you would just bump into people and ask questions and so on. And when you work remote, you have to learn to do all of that in an asynchronous way, right? It's all async now. And I guess a lot of teams and companies, they didn't have this experience, right? They were all into the office and now they are all remote, and then how to change that. So I saw a lot of cases where you have the boss saying, hey, I need this thing, and then put in Slack or something, or Teams asking a question. They do expect an answer right now, which is different when you are in a remote world, right? So this whole thing about not only working online, but learning how to work online at the same time was very challenging to a lot of companies.
Yeah, so it also provides opportunities, actually. And I'm just curious now to find out. I guess we're still discovering, and especially here in the Netherlands. So the infection rate is increasing again. So we're probably heading to some form of working more from home again. As you might have seen, I'm in an office at the moment, but I'm also just curious, how do you think it impacts the productivity? I mean, does it improve? Does it stay sort of the same? Does it declines? What are your experiences with that?
Well, my experience is I work with remote teams for quite a while, and the first thing that managers, they think, oh, if people work remote, they are not going to be as productive, or they're going to sleep during the afternoon and so on. They will be less productive, right? And what we see, and of course that probably is completely different in other areas, so I can only talk about tech teams, is that you have to worry about the opposite. It's way easier when you are at home, especially if you're a coder, programmer, or a tech guy or girl, and you are there, focus, and then it's 6 p.m. and you just continue. You just continue because maybe you don't have a family, right? You live with yourself and so on. And people if you take the analytics, people just work more. And that's not good in the long term. You could see improvement productivity because of that in short term, people start to burn out and so on. And that's the kind of people that you have to worry more, because if they are alone, working longer hours just because they have nothing else to do, they cannot go outside because maybe, it's lockdown or something. And the only human interaction that they had, is with the people in the office. I saw that a lot here in the Netherlands, where we have technical people from all over the world. So they came to the Netherlands. Can you imagine, like a new country, and suddenly they are locked inside a small room, far away from their families, and working, because that's the only way. You don't think about your parents that are in a foreign country that could maybe get ill, and you cannot get a flight and go there. Now things are better, right? But during the peak was really hard. So as managers, yeah, you have to really pay attention to that. And well, some kind of work, you can do it like developing software, you can do it from everywhere. But some others, it's not that easy, right? You need this human interaction.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of people move within the pandemic to, if they can afford it, if they can, find a good place, to a bigger apartments or a bigger houses, just so they can have this office space at home. And it's not always the case, right? Not necessarily you can or you want to move somewhere else. So that was another interesting aspect. And but I think recently Microsoft released a research on productivity and working remote or hybrid work, and what they found out is that actually, well, it looks like people were more productive. The things that was damaged was actually the innovation phase, because people are not in the office just brainstorming or kind of having those water cooler chats or anything like random conversations. Like everything had to be planned and organized either in asynchronous manner or synchronic manner, when you just you're doing the regular team checkpoints. So I think that's really interesting, and also touching on what you said around people working more hours. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely we saw it in the beginning. People were working more, but it was like kind of like a roller coaster, because now people are working more, but then the next week they don't work at all because they feel like they, either are burnout or they work too much or they need a break. So it was definitely interesting to see how people adjust, and also the different working hours, how different people structure their working day. Some people are more night owls, some people are morning people. It's definitely interesting to see. But I think what we did get out of that is we learned how to work in asynchronic manner. Not a lot of teams know how to do that. And we got a lot of new tools that big companies are building for us to be more productive. So I think there are pros and cons to all of that. We'll see I guess in 10 years from now, we'll know better what was good and what didn't.
Yeah, so Andre, Kinley's goal is to ensure a lasting harmony between the solutions we provide and the people who use them, because great things happen when people work together. What are the advantages of such an approach?
Right. Well, there are three different ways to have like these competitive strategies, right? It's operational excellence, product leadership, and customer intimacy, right? And Kinley is definitely customer intimacy. And the way to do it is work really close to your customers, right? You don't have those massive solutions that could, maybe be more, cost effective because but we are selling to more people, we are selling to less people, big players, and so on. And then you have to really work with the customers. For instance, when we are building a meeting room, you are not only building just the meeting room, but you're providing all the software, the know-how, how to operate that. You're getting the data from the meeting room. We are even providing the concierge service for people who are joining from the virtual meeting rooms, and then they have problems and so. So you have the whole package there, right? So there are advantages, of course, because we can provide customized solutions to the clients, right? The disadvantages is, of course, that you are providing customized solutions to your clients, and then you cannot expand and use the same solution over and over again because every client is different, right? But it's really nice to see. I mean, in some points, you can really provide a good service to key players and so on.
Yeah, is this a similar experience with your respective industries, Marcel and Adi? Do you guys have anything that you'd like to add, like some further experience to share?
I think it really depends. Like each region is slightly different, and each product is slightly different. And looking at Microsoft, it's a huge, huge company, and there are multiple strategies for different teams. So it's my answer to that. It's really it depends.
So the standard consultant answer, it depends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking sort of similar. So yeah.
All right.
I see a lot with Microsoft, right? If when we are talking about a product like Office, it's definitely one size fits all, right? It's an awesome product, and because of that. But when you can talk about like a customer journey to the cloud, then it's a customized project to that customer, right? With all the
Yeah.
help that Microsoft could give. It's a different scale of company, of course, as well, in different products.
Yeah, it also depends on the specific customer, right? Because like I mentioned, there are different sizes of customers and there are different expertise. Like if they want to build things in-house, or if they're like a software company themselves and they're building, let's say, the next SaaS solution, then it's a totally different conversation versus if they're building the next e-commerce or anything of such. So again, it really depends where they're coming from, where they want to invest, and what their business is.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for that. All right. So the next question: concepts such as technological agility, strategic product development, and a culture of rapid iterations have long been utilized in this age of digital disruption, with the goal of exceeding customer expectations. But how do you go from good to great?
Yeah, so it's the $100 million question, that is.
Well,
I think a truly important aspect to that is working with the right people, and that's the people in your company. So there's a similar book called Good to Great, written by Jim Collins. I'm a huge fan of it, and it describes how you need the right. Well, he talks about a bus, so how you need the right people on the bus, and then the
yeah.
bus decides where it's going. So yeah, if you have a mix of people that know, or at least try and find out what the customer wants, and the mix of people that then know how to build whatever is needed, I guess that's the best combination. So it's it's basically starts at the entrance door of your company. So who do you select, who do you recruit, and who do you hire in the end and work with? And if you do that right, well, I won't say a lot of things automatically go right, but it does make a big impact. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, this book is really, really good. I would say like it starts with good, right? Voltaire once said like the great is enemy of good, right? So aim for the good, and once you have your idea that they're up and running, right? Then you start measuring, and when you start measuring, then you bet in a new small feature because you want to get to great, but you don't really know how, right? So bet on something, put it there, let the users use, measure, and then you see if it's a good thing, you keep it. If it's a bad thing, you cut it. And then slowly you're betting more and more and more, and with more bets. And don't get me wrong, you will get way more wrongs than rights, but the rights
Yeah.
will count a lot. So I would say that start with good and to get to great, measure and slowly get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Echoing Marcel and Andre on what can we do and how we can iterate on that. I will also add having the mindset of how we can simplify the customer experience, how we can onboard them faster, what we can do, either if it's that, creating an open source tool that's going to help them migrate faster in a better way, with less friction as well. One of the examples is it's not a migration tool, but it's a tool for developers. This is the open source Copilot that helps developers autocomplete code so they can write better code, which they create better tools for their customers at the end of the day. And this is an open source that Microsoft released. And this is just, how they can simplify, because they, that specific speaks to developers, and developers here are the customer. It's how we can simplify their life so they can do more with the tools we provide them with. So it's a little bit of a different thinking. It's more of a scale conversation, because it's not about putting more people into it. It's not about developing more processes, but it's more about really how can we simplify their experience.
Yeah, and I think there's a natural tendency to instead of simplify the customer experience, to make it more complex. And the companies that really stand out are able to simplify it. And I mean, probably Apple is a good example with the first iPhone and all the ones that followed. So if you're able to do that, so then it's important to leave the relevant or the not so relevant things out, and only focus on the things you want to be great at.
Yeah, it's not about our products being good, but it's about our customers' product being amazing, right? And how we can help them do that. So,
and make it simple. It's really hard.
Yeah, that's really hard. Yeah.
All right. Well, Andre, I've got a question for you. How important is the ability to rapidly test and roll out new functionality when responding to changing customer needs and behavior? Do you employ DevOps or any other software methodologies to help achieve this?
Yes. So that's the thing. I think every modern software company now is going into that direction, right? And it's not only DevOps, but which is this whole cooperation between the ops team and the developers and putting them all together. But we shouldn't forget also the product team and security and everybody. So it's this ability of having the teams as autonomous as possible, so they can deliver an idea from end to end, right? And as I was saying before, I really liked this idea of every feature is actually a bet, right? You can say, you can go to the market, you can research and everything, and you have an idea, but you only prove this idea once you put on production and you actually have the numbers, right? Are the customers using this feature or not? Is it easy for them? How many clicks they are doing? Or are they going out your funnel because of some bad interface or something like that? And this whole idea of using DevOps, and that's why I like this thing of also that what we call the testing in production, right? Yes, I test in production. I think everybody should test in production, but not with everybody, right? So what you do is you create your feature, you throw into your production, then the feature is disabled, right? So using what we call feature flags, right? And then you could enable that for 1% of your users, maybe for some beta testers and so on. And then you measure. If everything's all right, then you could raise the bar to 5%. Oh, you get a good response, you go to 10% and so on. And if you don't, then you just cut it. And maybe a bad feature was seen by 1% of your customers, and that's fine, right? So it's definitely, I think it's critical today for every modern software company to do that, to go into this process of autonomy to the teams, automate everything, and having just really nice flow and cooperation between the dev and the ops teams.
Interesting. Question for any of you. Customers are placing increasing demands on products and services. An application that is still good enough today will no longer suffice tomorrow. This forces companies to improve continuously. How true is this for your respective companies?
100%.
Yeah.
Definitely 100%. It's a question of innovation. I think in tech, like a lot of us here are engineers at core, the basics, and we think like engineers, but actually when you look at the tech sector, it's all about innovation. It's like, how do we create things that are going to change the world? Like when we started with computers to smartphones to the cloud, any technologies, those things weren't exist. Like there wasn't anything like that before. So it's all about innovation and creativity. And same goes to here. It's really taking a walk in the customer's shoes and then thinking outside of the box, like, what can we do to improve that? What else can we iterate on, or how can we open the door to more innovations in different countries and different regions? We know each geolocation is slightly different, and kind of developing that growth mindset of not accepting the good or the great, so always thinking what else can I do to give more value, basically, to add more.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
they say that just something is impossible until your competitor does it, right? So you have to be innovating all the time, because that's the word we live in.
Yeah, beat your competitor to it.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like, competition is good. You don't want to be in a market where you have no competition, because then it's not really a market, right? So they help you to push yourself, push the boundaries, what you can do, right? And then everybody wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Adi, a question for you. You help both startups and enterprises to design, architect, and build their software and infrastructure, keeping in mind scalability, costs, team knowledge. Hang on, sorry. And business needs. How do you align this practice with the respective customers of your clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we'll do, we're looking at either tools, open source tools, or technical content, or GitHub repos, or anything of such that we can develop that can ease the life of customers onboarding to or migrating to Azure. What are the values that we can give? What can be done out of the box? What are the generic patterns that we see are constantly repeating themselves? The migrating, Postgres, for example, we've seen a lot of customers doing it. There's there's nothing unique in that space, for example. So, and also combined with the conversation of what their business is. Like, if they're a software company, then it's a different conversation, right? Maybe they need specific tools, but versus if they're, more traditional company, then they can leverage already existing services that are known and, have good performance and are managed by cloud providers, for example. So really thinking about that, and also understanding the team expertise, like what they know to build, what the people they need to hire sometimes, if they really want to hire. I, for example, worked a lot with managed Apache Spark in the cloud on Azure. And there was a whole conversation, should I run it on my Kubernetes? Should I use tools like Azure Databricks or Azure CNAS or managed tools? And my response is, it depends. Like, do you want to become an expert in Kubernetes? Do you want to become an expert in Apache Spark? What is your business? What's the real business that you're driving? Or are you want to build, the next managed tool on the cloud? And each one of them is very different conversations. And how we do it is, first we identify, understand, where they're coming from, and kind of collect those patterns, and then we turn it into presentations, GitHub repositories, content, technical blog posts that we post online for free for everyone to consume. Yeah, so this is basically how it goes: understanding where they are, understanding sometimes what the culprits that they're meeting, understanding that sometimes even if they have a good IT in-house, a good software developer team, R&D in-house, they still need to think about the business, right? They cannot support all the open source in the world that exists on Kubernetes, even if they want to, because otherwise that means they will need to develop that specific expertise in-house, and that means growing the engineering team, which is not always easy, especially today. We know it's hard in today's industry. Yeah, so this is how we tackle that on at scale, basically.
Right. And I just wanted to remind the viewers, especially the ones that have just been joining us, feel free to type in any question you may have for our panelists in the chat. I'll read them out, and yeah, so get asking away. Marcel, what are some of the important aspects of your customers' demand requests from when you're building custom software for them? Modern plug and play architectures and technological landscapes, creating the option to move or change fast if needed.
Yeah, so that's one of the key things that we see now that our customers demand. So I think, like I mentioned in the intro, the world is changing rapidly. I mean, just look what happened when COVID started, a year and a half ago, and we all need to adapt fast, and our technology needs to be able to support that. So what we're also seeing is quite a few customers wanting to sort of upgrade or modernize their old monolithic legacy application and basically split it up into loosely coupled services or microservices architecture. And that can be a pretty big job sometimes. And then also they want to move to the cloud, of course, because everyone is doing that. Most requests is for fast, flexible solutions that can be altered, when needed. And I guess it's needed more and more.
And like a
now
follow-up a follow-up question to that is like, how can you ensure that your customer needs are met while delivering a sustainable and adaptive solution for the future?
So I mean, we work in an agile way. We've done that for the last 20 years, I think. So that means involving the customer by default. And sometimes that's not enough. So sometimes we work with customer panels. Or we advise our customers to work with a panel. And also what Andre already mentioned. So if you can test in production, you do lots of A/B testing and open a new feature for 1 or 2% of your customer base, see how it works, adjust it, open it up to a bigger audience, and keep improving like that. That's mainly how we do it, and how we see our customers doing it as well. So,
And it's a long journey, right? I mean, you cannot only just, I'm installing here, launch directly, and now I have A/B testing and so on. So it's if you don't have the ability and the culture of doing these things, and for instance, if it's not okay to fail in your company, that's you won't get it. If you don't have a well-structured team working closely with the DevOps, security, automation, good, end-to-end. A really nice pipeline where everything is tested, it can go to production without human intervention, right? You cannot do it. So it's a long way. And I think that's why people are looking for you, Marcel, to decompose those applications and make it easy for deployment and to have multiple teams and so on. It's to achieve something like that, to be from an idea to something working on production, to go as fast as possible.
Yeah, chiming into it. There's a huge conversation about knowledge as well. So I'm coming from the Hadoop ecosystem, and how do we migrate to managed services in the cloud, like all the big data workloads, etc. How can we migrate? Where can we migrate if we want to migrate? And there's a huge conversation about knowledge, because a lot of new developers coming into the field don't necessarily have the knowledge of the Hadoop ecosystem, and they're now starting to learn about the cloud and the managed services and microservices directly, but they're kind of missing on, what they need to, what already exists, before thinking how they're moving it, or how they're embracing basically the cloud native approach. And also touching on the microservices, this is something that we've seen quite a lot, is customers coming in and saying, hey, I know I need 100 microservices, and you're like,
where do I buy them?
Yeah, it's like why 100, why not 200, 1000? Like, how did you figure out that number? And it's all because at the end it was a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding of what they have already, how they break it down, what is a microservices. Yeah, so it's we face, so we're still facing. That's why we're working so hard into educating and knowledge and sharing those knowledge on online, on helping people understand the tools that exist and how they can fully take advantage of them.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine that the amount of conversations that you have. Like I used to coach a lot of startups, and then you see teams of 3, 4 people, and they have like 50 microservices already. And what, right? You don't even have your idea proven, and now you are slicing your things. And now, if you're not really good with all the deployment part and all the automation part, instead of having one pipeline with your monolith, which there's nothing wrong with your monolith, right? Now you have 50 problems, right? And not just once, because you have to take care of 50 pipelines and how to deploy. And before, you have a call from one component to another, and it was a memory call, right? Super fast instance. And now you have a network between them. And you have to take care of retries and everything that could happen with a network, which is 100,000 times slower than your in-memory communication, right? So complexity goes to the roof, but the benefits are not really there. So that's why I think a lot of people, they get frustrated with Microsoft services, because today is the new silver bullet, right? If I only had 100 microservices, maybe my system would be faster or something like that, which doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Yeah.
I see that. Oh,
I just wanted,
sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Same goes to machine learning. Like we see a lot of customers like, hey, I'm going to hire the best data scientists, and they're going to develop all the end-to-end machine learning capabilities without yet still establishing my data infrastructure. So it's definitely interesting. It's exciting to see customers embracing those and understanding that in order to increase their business, they need to embrace the new technologies. But it is a conversation about knowledge and kind of defining the steps to move from one side into the next stage or the next goal.
Nice.
All right. Well, I see that we actually have a question from the chat, so I'm just going to jump to that. So the question is, speed of delivery is key to most organizations. In terms of end-to-end delivery across analysis, build, test, etc., where do you normally see the quick wins to improve efficiency exist?
Right. Well, when you talk about pipelines, I would say every place you have a human being doing the work there, it's a bottleneck to remove. So you should automate that. And it's not only the software part, but also the infrastructure part. So nowadays, you don't. I mean, I know that if you go to the portals, Azure, for instance, have a really nice, beautiful portal where you can click around to start your services. You shouldn't use it. You should use code to create your infrastructure as well, because then you can automate in the same way that you automate the software part. Well, one of the key things of this DevOps movement is people just took all the lessons learned from the software part of the business, and they are applying to the infrastructure part as well. So don't touch production. Your production should be only touched by your pipelines, right? And then again, once you have your pipeline, is it slow? What's missing there? And it's all about, every now and then stopping and checking, where is my bottleneck? Which step is taking the most, or is making us too slow down, right? And that's the place where you should optimize. And of course, for every company, for every kind of software, it's going to be different. But the key thing is automate everything.
Does anyone else have something to add?
Yeah, I think Andre, yeah.
Yeah.
It just sounds a bit blunt when you say eliminate people, but
no, but that's the key
actually,
difference. Yeah, it's not eliminate people. It's never is. It's to free people from the boring stuff that we can make mistakes, and let them have time to do the work, the things that we love to do, which is coding and stuff, or thinking in new ideas and so on. It's basically freeing people to do more meaningful work, and let the machine do the rest.
Yeah.
Makes sense. All right. Well, we did briefly cover a little bit of the pandemic, the corona pandemic, but Andre, I have a question for you. Given the nature of your applications at Kinley, the video conferencing tools, I imagine Kinley has experienced some significant growth in the demand for your services during the corona pandemic. But is there a big difference in the features or requirements that have been demanded from new customers compared to customers before the pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. Well, as we were talking a bit ago, it's like video conference here to stay, right? And the remote work is here to stay as well. What we call the hybrid way of working.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it's the most difficult one to get it right? And that's a trap too that a lot of companies they are going to, because they just think, okay, now we can go back to the office, and you can partially stay in the office and partially stay at home. So you'll never have your whole team there together. Or maybe you do for one day of the week or two and so on. Because I do miss the brainstorming sessions where you have those whiteboarding tools and so on. Everybody's together and talking at the same time. Because one thing that we couldn't realize or we don't know still how to do it is to talk at the same time in a conference. It's just impossible, right? You cannot have two different conversations at the same time in a conference. Well, anyway, so what we see is like companies are going back, right? It's opening. Maybe we will have a drawback now. Well, we are not going back to the office still, but the future is hybrid, right? And what we are seeing is that a lot of companies, they are getting like those physical desks, like fixed places that we had before, and they are removing a lot of them and instead making like small meeting rooms. And they are not like regular meeting rooms anymore. People are already thinking into how to make this space a collaborative space, because you will have people there, but you also will have people working remotely at the same meetings, right? And one thing that happened when people started now going back to the office is that, well, we are having calls all the time, and then you have this really nice open office space, which is the worst way you could ever have your office, but it's the cheapest way, so people do it. But everybody's in a call now. So you walk into an office these days, and it's like a call center. It's like you cannot concentrate anymore because, well, the person at your side is talking to someone, the person on your right is talking to another person, and so on. So what they clearly you can see is this lack of small meeting rooms for conferences, right? So what companies are doing? They are building more meeting rooms, not less. And I would think, before I would think, hey, it's so bad. People are not going to the office and they're not building more meeting rooms. They actually are. But different meeting rooms, right? And they have like now this flex desk system where you go to the office. Now you can, have. Why would you go to the office? To see your team, have a nice, collaborative session. And then what they are doing is to having, instead of having just big office, is to have like small branches here and there for people to go. And then maybe they don't have the best place to work at their homes, but they do have a place to go where it's silence. They have good coffee there, and they could meet other people there as well. So we see more this integration between the technology that's in a meeting room and then the virtual meeting room.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically you see a shift from maybe before the pandemic, then online video software used to be used for like big meetings with a big group, maybe
or clients,
now
right?
Or clients, and now it's used maybe more on team level, or like 2 or 3 individuals working with 2 or 3 other individuals, but then remote. So it really needs to be more collaborative instead of a sort of like an online presentation tool.
Exactly. And they are changing as well. We see a lot of what we call the Zoom fatigue, right? Because we go to back-to-back meetings all the time, and then at the end of the day, you're just dead already. Because before, come on, you would go to a meeting, and then you have your next meeting, you walk, you get a coffee, you talk to people. And there's another thing, right? Before you would arrive like 5 minutes late for a meeting, nobody would care. But now, if the meeting is 10 a.m., in 2 minutes, people are like, where's this dude? Come on.
Sorry, I'm late.
Yeah, exactly.
Normally you wouldn't say that.
Exactly. And you have this, what we were saying before this, you have this weird, silence, because sometimes people don't know each other, so you're waiting, the camera is on or off, and so on. So you have this kind of things. So the software is evolving to make it more pleasant for us to work, to have more breaks, or to just other things that's not just day to day meetings one after another. So it's hybrid, that's for sure. So that will lead to more collaboration within the software. Well, think about like pair programming that people used to do at the offices all the time, and now it's all remote, right? It's all remote. Well, the tools are evolving as well.
Yeah, interesting. I can definitely relate to some of those points.
Yeah, likewise. I can definitely say that they now renovated the Microsoft Tel Aviv office, and they changed the landscape completely, adding small conference rooms and a lot of tech into it for people to have the online conversation and kind of the hybrid meetings as well. And they also changed some of the rooms. They turned them into focus room. We actually have sofas and whiteboard, but you still have the system to connect to online meetings, so you can do it and connect with other colleagues and wherever they are.
Yeah, so on and offline working gets more integrated than it used to be.
Yeah, and there's no way back, because a lot of companies, we did a proper. Most companies did is like, oh, I can hire remote now, and then you hire someone somewhere, right? And then, oh, now let's go back to the office. Well, not everybody, because maybe you hired someone in another country or like 1,000 kilometers from your place. So the future is different now.
Would you not like people? So when you hire people from other countries, Andre, would you not like them to be able to, well, at least collaborate together like once or twice a week physically in the same office?
Well, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's a good thing to have. Of course, it's way easier if everybody's in the same room for most of the time, right? It's easier, right? But the beauty of the async work and the remote work is, first, you can hire talent everywhere, and not the ones who happen to be living here in Amsterdam, for instance, right? So you have this broad way of hiring, and that's what's happening, right? We see a lot of people just moving to. Well, I have some developers, for instance. One of them, he went to Brazil and he stayed there 1.5 months, and we couldn't even see the difference anymore, because internet these days. Well, I mean, it was a really like we got lucky that this whole pandemic thing. It's a really bad thing, but it happens in a time where we already have good ways to work remote. Because if that happens like 20 years ago, it would be completely different, right?
Yeah.
But this freedom is good, and you can hire more diverse team, right? Because especially if you are developing for the world, so you have to have those different fields within your team, because your product is going to be used by different cultures and languages and stuff. And if you have developers who has this first-hand experience, it also helps, right?
Yeah.
So it's nice, and you have a distributed team. What most people or most companies do, even before the pandemic, right? It's from time to time you fly everybody to a place, and you have a nice party for everybody to get to know each other, not to work together, because that's different, but to get to know each other. Because the moment that you share a meal or a nice beer, and you have a conversation that's more personal with the other person, the whole trust changes, right? And you're better integrated as a team. So that's really important.
Yeah, I can also add to it. So coming from a geo-distributed team, I think it definitely opens the door to learn about other cultures and how other people are working. And like I was lucky to work with people from Africa and India and Singapore and North America and Canada and Europe and a lot of great places in the world. But I will say there are some challenges, like how do you create a safe space for everyone? Because there is a culture difference. And there are, time zone differences, and it requires some adaptation, like some changes to the processes and the structure in order to facilitate, such team. I think the benefits are greater than the changes that needs to be done, but it is important to take that in mind. Like if you hire someone from a completely different culture, you have to make sure you're aware of, different communication styles and, um,
Definitely, yeah.
processes, etc.
Yeah, what you said is really important. And you have two different ways, not two, but let's say it's completely different when people are remote, but they are in more or less in the same time zone, and when they are geographically distributed, because then you don't have the same time zone anymore. So even a meeting where you would like, I would like a meeting with all the tech department. Well, at what time? Because you don't have like this time where everybody's working at the same time anymore. So you have to think about everybody should be inclusive, right? So you should do it twice, right? Record, and but if you record, you're not really including live questions from other people. It's difficult and it changes, and you have to think in a synchronous way. Uh, but it's worth it, it depends, of course, the business and everything, but it's just a completely different way of working.
All very, very interesting points. So I see that we also had another pre-submitted question from one of our viewers. The question states, I find that customer expectation is a vague idea. There are lots of individuals that have different expectations and different priority for those. How can you measure exceeding something you cannot measure? Does anyone have an answer for this?
I think it always start with a baseline. You experiment, you try different things, and you start with a baseline so you know if you're improving or not. And I will say, human beings are not machines, right? If someone gives you a specific score, doesn't mean the next company for the exact same service is going to give you the same score. So be open to that and understand that, bake it somehow into the measuring system, and think about that also, and not only the numbers at the end.
Yeah, and although you cannot measure the expectations, but you can measure the behavior after the feature is there, right? We don't even know what we want sometimes. I mean, as customers, we are, sometimes we don't know what we want. We want a nice system, right? But the only one, but that's the whole thing about agile. If we knew, we would use waterfall and be happy, right? We could specify everything in advance. We know what works, what doesn't, and then you have your system 6 months or 10 years later. But with agile, that's what we do. We talk to customers, we try to understand the expectations, we put a production, and we measure as fast as possible. So for me, what's the most important thing in a situation like this, and that's why software is so hard, is that what's the time from idea to production? Because then you can iterate faster, and if you get something wrong, you know really fast, and then you don't lose money on it, right? So you change and you change and you change, but you will. The question is really brilliant because it's true. You cannot measure this expectation, but maybe the customer doesn't know what he or she really wants. So put in front of that person and measure. That thing you can measure. You can measure if the person will go back, if they will finish some form, if they will buy your product. That thing, if they will return or not. And then with that, you know if you're going into the right way or not. And then adapt and try again.
Yeah, well, thank you for that answer. Does anyone have something they'd like to add? I think that was brilliantly covered. All right, well, it doesn't seem like we have any other questions, and we are nearing time. So with that, I just want to say thank you all to the panelists and to our viewers for taking the time today to be here with us today. We do hope that you've enjoyed today's Tech Leader panel. It's been a pleasure having you with us all. I do want to say stay tuned for our future events. We will definitely be organizing more Tech Leader panels in the future, and we look forward to welcoming you at one of these events again soon. Until then, enjoy your evenings, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lenny.
Thank you, Lenny. Thank you, everyone.